Let's start solving test 2 of IELTS Reading Academic from Cambridge Book 19. The title of the passage is The Industrial Revolution in Britain. Let's first understand what Industrial Revolution means. You might know the word revolution from science, like the Earth's revolution around the sun, which means moving around in a circle. But another meaning of the word revolution is a big change. The Industrial Revolution was a time when big changes happened in how people worked and lived. Before this, most people lived in villages and worked on farms. During the Industrial Revolution, many moved to cities and new machines made work faster and easier. In this passage, we'll see examples of these changes. Sometimes you'll see a small star called an asterisk next to a word in the passage. At the bottom of the passage, that word is explained. This definition is only to help you understand the word in the text. There will never be any questions based on these definitions, so you don't need to study them deeply. For example, in this passage, the word agrarian has a definition at the bottom. It means something related to land or farming. If I want to understand the sentence in the passage where this word is used, I can read it like in Britain, it was a period where a largely rural, farming related society was transformed. We now start with the first set of questions, which are gap fill questions. In gap fill questions, the questions are in the same order as the information in the passage. First, find the location in the passage using keywords from the question. Then, understand the question carefully. And finally, look for the answer in that part of the passage. Because the answers are in order, you can focus on one question at a time. No need to read all the questions at once. Let's start by finding where the answers might be. The questions mention names like Newcomen, Watt, Bolton, Cook, and Wheatstone. These are easy to spot in the passage. You can scan for these names to find the location of the answer. The questions also have subheadings like steam power, textile industry, iron industry, and so on. These subheadings match the topics in the passage, so they can guide us to the right paragraphs. Because of these subheadings, it's very likely that the answers for questions under each subheading are in the same part of the passage. So let's work through the questions one by one using these tips. We start with the names which are mentioned in the first part of the questions. In the passage, these names are mentioned in the second paragraph, so we don't need to read the first paragraph for now. We see Newcomen mentioned in one sentence, then in the next sentence it talks about Watt and Newcomen, and then the next sentence mentions Watt and Bolton. The first sentence in the questions which mentions Newcomen does not have any blank. We have to start from this sentence, which means in the passage we start looking for answer from here. The question asks about Watt and Bolton's steam engine, and the passage says Watt worked with Bolton to invent a new steam engine. So this is the steam engine that Watt and Bolton invented, or this is Watt and Bolton's steam engine. This same sentence also has the word gear, which is in the question. So we can be sure that the answer is in this sentence from the passage. Now let's understand the question. The question talks about something in the engine that is moving, and its movement was linked to the gear system. So we need to figure out what this something is. In the passage, it says, driven by both the forward and backward strokes of the piston. Driven by means powered by or moved by. Piston means the part of the engine that moves back and forth inside the cylinder. Back and forth way means moving in one direction and then the opposite direction repeatedly. Strokes means repeated movement in one direction and then back again. It could mean strokes of a brush when painting, strokes when patting someone, or strokes when swimming, or in this case, strokes means piston going back and forth. So this tells us that piston was moving in a back and forth way. The word while here means at the same time. So when the piston is moving in back and forth way, at the same time something else is happening. Gear means a wheel with teeth that fits into another wheel to transfer movement or power. We have commonly heard this word in cars. For example, shifting gears lets the car go faster or slower. But gears are not just in cars. They are used in many machines and engines to help parts move and work together. Mechanism means a system of parts working together. So, at the same time as the piston was moving back and forth, the gear was moving in rotary motion. Rotary motion means spinning in a circle. We see this kind of motion in many everyday things. For example, the blades of a fan spin in rotary motion, the hands of a clock move in a circular path, and the wheels of a bicycle or car also rotate in this way. Now we have two things moving, the piston and the gear. The question asks about the thing that is connected to the gear system. The passage says the gear mechanism it was connected to. It refers to the piston. So, two things are mentioned, the piston and the gear. The question is not about the type of movement, but about what was moving and connected to the gear system. That is the piston. So, the answer to the first question is piston. Now, let's move on to the next question. The second question says, a greater supply of blank was required to power steam engines. Let's first try to figure out the tentative location of the answer. This is where we found the answer to the first question. There is just one sentence left in the second paragraph after the answer to the first question. This sentence does not mention a greater supply of something. Also, the second question talks about powering steam engines in general, not specifically Watt and Boulton's steam engine, which was mentioned in the first question. So, we'll need to start looking in the third paragraph for the answer. Let's understand the question first. To power here means to provide energy for engines to work. For example, petrol is needed to power a car. The question says that more of something was needed to power or run steam engines. What was this something? In the passage, the first sentence mentions grew rapidly, which means increased quickly. This could relate to the phrase greater supply in the question. The first sentence is quite long. Let's break it down to understand it better. Which was a relatively cheap energy source is a dependent clause. It gives extra information about coal. It tells us that coal was inexpensive and used as a source of energy. If we remove this part, the main sentence still makes sense. So, the main idea here is that the demand for coal grew rapidly or increased quickly. Next, the sentence has the word as, which here means because. The reason for the increased demand is explained after this. Coal was needed for factories and for steam powered transportation. Steam powered transportation means steam engines. The sentence also uses the conjunction not only but also. This is a way of listing two related things. It means both factories and steam powered transportation needed coal. If we rewrite this part, we can say coal was needed for factories and for steam powered transportation. From this sentence, we learn that the demand for coal increased, which means a greater supply of coal was required. Why? Because it was needed for steam powered transportation, or in other words, to power steam engines. So the answer to the second question is coal. At the end of the paragraph, the phrase widely used is mentioned. Widely used means something that is used a lot or in many places. This might confuse you because you might think widely used refers to a greater supply. However, widely used doesn't mean an increased amount, it just means something was popular or common in use. In this context, the sentence is talking about boats and ships being widely used for transporting goods. It's describing how steam powered transportation became common. So, this sentence is not related to the question. Moving on to the third question. The answer to the first question came from the second paragraph, and the second question came from the third paragraph. The subheading before the third and fourth questions is textile industry. Textiles are mentioned in the first sentence of the fourth paragraph. So, this is where we expect the answers of the third and fourth question to be. Textiles means fabrics or materials like wool and cotton that are used to make clothes and other items. Textile industry means the business of producing these materials. The second sentence of the paragraph mentions spinning jenny and power loom, which are both mentioned in the fourth question. So we should look for the answer to the third question in the first sentence of the paragraph, and the answer to the fourth question should come after that. Let's understand the third question. The question mentions spinners and weavers. Spinners are people who turn fibers like cotton or wool into yarn or thread. Weavers are people who use the thread to create fabric or cloth. The question is asking where they worked before Industrial Revolution. It is mentioned that they worked at home, and we have to look for where else they worked. The passage says, prior to the Industrial Revolution, prior means before, the British textile business was a true cottage industry. Cottage industry means a small business. Let's understand this sentence further. The work performed in small workshops or even at homes by individual spinners, weavers, and dyers. We can rewrite this in active voice in a simpler way that spinners, weavers, and dyers worked in small workshops or even homes. From this, we learn that they worked in two places, in small workshops and at homes. Notice that in the question, home is mentioned first and then there is a blank. In the passage, the order is reversed. Workshops are mentioned first and homes are mentioned next. The answer could be small workshops or workshops. But there's a key point in the instructions. Write one word only. So the correct answer is workshops. If the instruction had been no more than two words, then both small workshops and workshops would have been acceptable answers. The phrase home and abroad at the end of the paragraph might confuse you into thinking that the answer could be abroad. There are multiple reasons why this is clearly incorrect. First, if you write in abroad here, it is incorrect. We don't use the preposition in before abroad. Question says before Industrial Revolution, which is mentioned at the beginning of the paragraph. Starting mid 1700s is after Industrial Revolution, and machines and factories are mentioned here. Also, spinning jenny and power loom are mentioned, which tell us that we should find the answer to the fourth question after this, which means the answer to the third question has to be before this. This sentence actually refers to the demand for cloth both locally and internationally, not where the spinners and weavers worked. Here, home refers to within the country. It doesn't mean the residence of a person. Moving on to the fourth question. This is where we found the answer to the third question. Spinning jenny and power loom are mentioned in the next sentence. The spinning jenny and power loom are machines used in the textile industry. However, you don't need to know these exact meanings to answer the question. Spinning jenny relates to spinning, which is the process of making thread, and power loom relates to weaving, which is turning thread into fabric. So, from the names alone, we can tell these are machines for spinning and weaving, which is enough to understand their role in the passage. A key phrase in this question is not as much. It means that something was required in smaller amounts. The passage says, with these machines here refer to spinning jenny and power loom. So, with these machines, relatively little labor was required to produce cloth. Once here means after. Innovations means new inventions. This part of the paragraph tells us that after the invention of machines like the spinning jenny and the power loom, weaving cloth and spinning yarn and thread became much easier. That means it became easier to produce cloth. Relatively little labor was required means not as much labor was required. So the answer to the fourth question is labor. Moving on to the next question. Questions 5 and 6 have the subheading Iron Industry. Iron is mentioned at the start of the fifth paragraph. That's where we expect the answers. Let's first focus on question 5. Smelting of iron ore with coke resulted in material that was better blank. In the passage, we see the words smelting, iron ore, and coke. So, even if you don't fully understand these terms, you can still figure out that smelting is a technique and coke is a material made by heating coal. These details tell us that the process of smelting created a material that had better something. We need to find out what that something is. The next sentence in the passage says, this method, which means the method of smelting, was cheaper and produced metals that were of a higher quality. An important concept when looking for this answer is that material refers to anything used to make or create objects. So the word material can refer to metal, plastic, wood, etc. Here in the passage, material is referring to coke because it is explaining what coke is. Later, the word metals is mentioned. Metals are also a kind of material. So, as a result of this method, that is the method of smelting, what was produced? Metals or material was produced which had better quality or higher quality. The answer to this question, therefore, is quality. Now, moving on to question 6. Demand for iron increased with the growth of the blank. This is where we found the answer to the fifth question. This is the last sentence of the paragraph, but it's a long sentence. So we'll look for the answer here first. We are looking for something that grew or that increased. The growth of this something led to or resulted in an increased demand or more demand for iron. We have to find out what this something is. Two important phrases in the passage are in response to, which means as a result of, and demand created by, which means that the need for something came as a result of something else. Iron and steel production increased or expanded. There were two reasons for this increase. One is the wars, second is the expansion of the railways. In the question, we are asked only one reason. It cannot be the Napoleonic Wars because there is no word which is used when describing the wars that corresponds to the word growth in the question. But the second reason, which is the expansion of the railways, means growth of railways. So, iron production expanded in response to expansion of railways, or we could say that demand for the iron increased with the growth of or with the expansion of the railways. The answer to the sixth question is railways. Moving on to the seventh question. After the sixth question, we have a subheading communications, but the two sentences in this do not have any blanks. However, they do have some easy to find keywords. There are names, there are words like telegraphy and locomotives. So we use the words and names from this to skip parts of the passage. The answer to the sixth question is from the fifth paragraph. Words from the communications part of the question, which has no blanks, are in the sixth paragraph. The heading of the next part is urbanization. Words such as towns and cities from this part are mentioned in the seventh paragraph. So we skip the sixth paragraph and start searching from the seventh paragraph. Urban refers to anything related to cities. Urbanization means development of small towns and villages so that they turn into cities. The first sentence in the question does not have any blank. In the passage, this part of the question is mentioned here, which means the answer should be after this. In the question, the new cities are described as dirty, crowded, and lacked sufficient. Lacked means did not have, sufficient means enough. The cities did not have enough or adequate something. That is what we have to find. Let's see what the passage says. This part of the sentence means when small towns and villages quickly became cities, it caused big or serious problems. The cities were overcrowded, there was pollution, and inadequate or not enough sanitation. Dirty from the question can refer to pollution, crowded is overcrowded, lacked sufficient means insufficient or inadequate sanitation. The answer to the seventh question is sanitation. Now that we have gone through all the gap fill questions, let's review some important tips that can help you find the answers. The questions follow the same order as the information in the passage. That means the answer to the second question is found after the first, the third after that, and so on. Look for location keywords like names and subheadings. In the questions, we often find clues like names of people, other capitalized words like Industrial Revolution, or topics such as textile industry and iron industry. These help you locate the relevant paragraph for the answer. The answers to the different parts of the question are not found in the same paragraph. For example, the answers to the first part, steam power, were in the second and third paragraphs. The textile industry answers were in the fourth paragraph. So make sure to look at multiple paragraphs if needed. And it helps to keep in mind that the answers to different subheadings in the question are likely to be in different paragraphs in the passage. And a very important tip: skip irrelevant paragraphs by focusing on location clues. For example, we skipped the first paragraph because the first question had some names which were mentioned in the second paragraph. Similarly, we skipped the sixth paragraph. After the fifth paragraph, we straight away started looking for answers in the seventh paragraph because there are no blanks in this part of the questions. These small details can make a big difference in your reading score. By using these tips, you'll be able to find answers more efficiently, save time, and focus on the relevant parts of the paragraph. Now let's move on to the next set of questions: true, false, not given. The strategy for tackling true, false, not given questions is very similar to the one we used for gap fill questions. Here's a step by step approach that works. The questions are in the same order as the information in the passage. So we do one question at a time. Look for location keywords such as names and numbers. Find the tentative location in the passage. Then read the question carefully, read the relevant part of the passage, and figure out the answer. These rules help you avoid the confusion between true, false, and not given. Let's begin with the eighth question. First, we try to find the tentative location of the answers. There are no names in the first two questions. The 10th question has names. These names are mentioned in the sixth paragraph. Smelting and iron ore from the ninth question are mentioned in the fifth paragraph. We have already seen these words when doing gap fill questions. So the answer to the eighth question has to be before the fifth paragraph. The question mentions canals. In the passage, the word canals is mentioned in the third paragraph. So that is where the answer has to be. Let's understand the question. Canals are water bodies. The question says that the canals grew or increased in number rapidly or very quickly. So that means this part is giving the reason why the canals grew in number. The reason for this was to transport more goods or products around the country or around Britain. So, what the question means is the number of canals in Britain increased rapidly to transport goods across the country. To answer, we need to ask these three questions. Did the number of canals in Britain increase? Did they increase rapidly? And was the reason for this increase to transport goods? If the answer to all the three questions is yes, the answer would be true. Only the last sentence of paragraph 3 mentions canals. Widely used means commonly used. This sentence says boats and ships were used for transporting goods on canals. We don't know the answer to any of these questions based on the information in the text. There is no mention of how many canals were there and whether they increased in number or not. Two terms from the passage can confuse you. One is widely used, which means commonly used. But this says boats and ships were used. Nothing about the number of canals. Also, grew rapidly is mentioned in the beginning of the paragraph. This part is about demand of coal increasing. Again, nothing to do with canals. We have discussed this part of the paragraph in detail when discussing the second question. Because we don't know the answer to these questions, which means that the information is not given in the passage. The answer to the eighth question is not given. Let's start with the ninth question. The location keywords in this question are iron, smelting, ore, and coke. All of them are mentioned in the fifth paragraph. We have already read some parts of this paragraph when looking for the answer to the fifth question. Let's understand the ninth question now. Smelting is a technique that uses iron ore and coke. The question asks if costs in the iron industry rose or increased when this technique of smelting was used. Costs rising in an industry means the cost of machines, labor, etc. In the paragraph, the first sentence mentions that there were many changes in the iron industry, and one major change was the introduction of smelting. Then it says this method was cheaper. This method here refers to smelting, which means the costs decreased. They did not increase or rise. The word higher is mentioned in the paragraph, but it refers to the higher quality of metals produced, not an increase in costs. So there is a mention of the use of smelting technique, but after this technique was used, the cost did not increase, it decreased. So the answer to the ninth question is false. In the 10th question, three names are mentioned. These can help us locate the answer in the passage. These names are mentioned in the 6th paragraph. Now let's understand the question. Samuel Morse developed a communication system. William Cook and Charles Wheatstone also developed a communication system. The question says that the system developed by Morse was more reliable than the system developed by Cook and Wheatstone. Reliable means dependable, that is something we can trust or depend on. Let's look at the passage now. Cook and Wheatstone patented a telegraphy system. Patented means to invent or develop something and then legally claim that it is theirs. Telegraphy system is a communication system. So this part mentions that a communication system was developed by Cook and Wheatstone. Then it is mentioned that Samuel Morse and other people as well worked on their own versions. Their own versions means their own versions of communication systems or telegraphy systems. So now till here we have a mention of a communication system being developed by Morse and another one being developed by Cook and Wheatstone. After this, it says that the system developed by Cook and Wheatstone was used for railway signaling. There is information about communication systems by these people, but there is no information about whether one system was more dependable than the other. You might be tempted to think that Cook and Wheatstone's system was more reliable because it was used for railway signaling. But the passage does not say that this was the reason it was chosen. Because information about a part of the question is not given in the passage, the answer to the 10th question is not given. Moving on to the 11th question. The question mentions economic benefits. This is where we found the answer to the 10th question in the 6th paragraph. Economic output is mentioned at the beginning of the 8th paragraph. So we can skip the 7th paragraph. The 7th paragraph mentions impact of industrial revolution. The question mentions economic benefits. Impacts could be benefits. But because economic is mentioned in the 8th paragraph, we look for the answer in the 8th paragraph first. If we don't find it there, then we'll start looking in the 7th paragraph. Economic benefits means advantages related to money. Certain sectors of society means, for example, only the rich people or only the factory owners, etc. To answer the question, we have to find out if the passage mentions that there were economic benefits of industrialization, and if there were economic benefits, did everyone receive those benefits or did a few people receive those benefits? Let's look at the passage now. The first sentence says that industrialization improved the standard of living for middle and upper classes. Middle and upper classes refers to specific sectors of society, and they clearly benefited economically because their standard of living improved. But the same sentence says many poor people continued to struggle, meaning they did not receive the economic benefits. Later, it talks about low wages of factory workers, which also means that the factory workers did not get the economic benefits of industrial revolution. From this, we can conclude that the economic benefits were limited to certain sectors of society, that is, the middle and upper class. Some other sectors or sections of society did not get economic benefits or did not make a lot of money because of industrial revolution. So, the answer to the 11th question is true. The word overall can confuse you because you might think that everyone benefited. But the overall here is for the country, not for different parts of population. And in the same sentence, it is mentioned that poor people did not benefit. Also, the sentence starts with the word although, which is an indication that something opposite to this overall may be mentioned in the second half of the sentence. Moving on to the 12th question. The 12th question mentions weavers and textile machines, which are mentioned in the same paragraph, the 8th paragraph. Weavers are people who make fabric or cloth from thread. We discussed this earlier in the gap fill questions. Skilled means someone who is trained and proficient in their craft. The question means that some weavers believed they would lose jobs if new textile machines were used. This is where we found the answer to the previous question. We start looking after this. The passage says that British weavers objected to the increased use of mechanized looms and knitting frames. Mechanized looms and knitting frames are textile machines. Mechanized means operated by machines rather than by hand. It also says many had spent years learning their craft. This means many weavers had spent years learning their craft, which means that they were skilled. And they feared, they here again refers to the British weavers and the textile workers. The weavers feared, or they were worried, or they believed that the machines operated by unskilled people were robbing them of their livelihood. Livelihood means the way someone earns a living, which is their job. Robbing of livelihood means taking away the livelihood or taking away the job. So, skilled weavers did believe that the machine operators or the machines would take their jobs. This means the answer to the 12th question is true. The mention of unskilled machine operators might confuse you. These are people operating the machines and they are different from the skilled weavers. The unskilled operators are getting the jobs while the skilled weavers are losing their jobs due to the introduction of textile machines. Moving on to the 13th question. There are two capitalized words in this question. Luddites is mentioned both in the 8th and 9th paragraphs, but Huddersfield is mentioned only in the 9th paragraph. So we'll look for the answer in the 9th paragraph. The question says there was some sympathy among local people for the Luddites who were arrested near Huddersfield. To have sympathy for someone means to feel bad for someone, to have compassion for them, or to support them. Luddites were a group of people. They were arrested near Huddersfield. Did the local people, that is, did the people of Huddersfield, feel sympathy for the Luddites who were arrested? Luddites are mentioned quite a few times in the passage in the 8th and 9th paragraphs. But Huddersfield and Luddites being arrested are mentioned only towards the end. So we'll focus on this part. It mentions that some Luddites were shot, others were arrested, and some were hanged and transported to Australia. Finally, it mentions that the resistance or the protest ended. There is no mention of what the local people, that is, what the people of Huddersfield, thought about the protest or the Luddites. Were the Luddites arrested near Huddersfield? Yes, they were. Did local people have sympathy for them? We don't know because it is not given. The answer to the 13th question is not given. With this, we have completed all the questions of section 1. Take note of where we found the answers for the gap fill questions and the true false not given questions. We did not need to read the first paragraph at all for any of these questions. Similarly, there were other parts of the passage we didn't have to read to find these answers. Being able to identify the tentative location of answers in the passage using keywords is a crucial strategy. For each question, we first located the relevant part of the text, then focused on reading a couple of sentences around it. Practice this approach. It saves both time and energy while tackling reading texts. That's it for now. I hope this video was helpful. I'll continue solving the rest of this reading passage in upcoming videos. Bye for now and all the very best.